You'll have to upset a lot of people in this life to do what's right. And surely love or hate will be our downfall, being attached to what others think. And if you think anything in this life is by chance, random, coincidence, then you're either blind or willfully ignorant. Welcome. And this next video is just going to be full of bits, similar to many of my videos. And I'm going to open up with this coin that I featured in a past video. This past video was really just showcasing a lot of Martin's fine work at Flat Earth British. And here what we can see is this amazing coin. Here, a coin in which the date is left for interpretation, either 1669 or the letter I, 699, leaving a 1,000-year variable. And the comment said, has anybody seen the words Tartaria in that coin? And I had completely missed it. And at this point, the video is about 4 months old. And here it is, Tartaria. Tartaria. We see below it Asia and Africa. And up here we see what looks like Hebrew lettering, and up here the words to Salvor, and here the year. What is certain is in this early year it was worth minting the words of what is now a lost people on this coin. And thank you for this, Sir Vasco. Excellent catch. And this part might be a little sarcastic. Oh, 1899. What a fine year. In 1899, we could build buildings like this in 1 year. 1899. No permits needed, no construction photos. Life was easy in those days. So easy that you would build a power plant in this fashion. No need for a square box. What kind of power were they generating? Who cares? This building demands respect. The Fernheis Work Power Station in Dresden, Germany. Built 1899 to 1900, and it was demolished in 1935. Why? The people of 1935 didn't appreciate the laborsome efforts of 1 year. They considered it unsightly and unnecessary. The bits that were not demolished were finally burned in a fire in 1945. Don't be fooled by the aged look of this work of wonder. The aging process was added to this construction as a final detail. And why such a grand tower in this old power plant? This was for the workers to take their lunch break. In 1899, workers hardly needed to work at all, always ready to pose for a picture, and often wearing their finest suits. Next we'll have a little look at San Francisco. Always a treat, like rice-a-roni. And here in 1899 again, such a fine year. 1899. Only 40 some odd years after the gold rush, this old gold mining town and people of the Old West decided to erect a city hall. Which one is it? Both, of course. One was not enough. Unfortunately, it was destroyed in the 1906 earthquake. Fortunately, nobody cared back then, because it was such a great year. After all, it only took a few years to build, and besides, they had the up-and-coming World's Fair to attend to. Here's a share by Heidi, and she tells us, thanks for the glorious videos. I want to reach out to you about an ancient stone technique that can produce an almost lace-like quality or details. Things they normally tell us are chiseled. I worked at a masonry supply company, so masonry always intrigued me, and I noticed building details. At the Idaho Capitol building, I took a tour many years ago, and the guide said that they had to bring in a mason from Europe to work on the building, because his family was one of the only ones left in the world with the old world masonry knowledge of how to create the faux marble. Online they mostly talk about the scagliola technique that can create the faux marble columns, but I always remember what the tour guide said. And here we can see in 1905, Idaho's first state capital. Oh, what a beauty. And it looks like somebody planted these trees behind the Capitol at least 50 to 100 years before this. And now we can look in 1920, replaced with this pile of junk. Going from this warm, rustic feel to this cold, high-tech. And a very awesome share. Thank you, Heidi. And here's a nice share from Paul Tino. He told us he's on a road trip, and when he went back to the hostel he was staying at, he picked up a Book of Mormon out of curiosity. After skimming through the book, came to 3 Nephi 8, which mentions a worldwide storm, an earthquake, and lightning that struck the entire world as never before, until entire cities in America are either sunk, burnt, or buried under new mountains, simply ravaged, until most are left dead from 3 days of darkness. It mentions how some of the buildings in some of the cities were left standing, and it reminded him of the big bad wolf in old mythology, blowing down all the buildings, except for the ones made of brick. An excellent share. Thank you, Paul. I think all the books of old have these similar stories. Everything has been in plain sight, we just needing to put the puzzle pieces together. So strange that it would be our generation, and when I mean our generation, I mean everybody watching these videos, existing in this time and space. And this was a very interesting share. I'm not sure about the history of this man, but he gave a fascinating lecture, here about 13 minutes long. Second professor-like lecture I've listened to in the last couple days, and really impressed with the ideas of human development and giving the right conditions or wrong conditions. Children, or when it comes to the historical narrative, an entire people, shaping a people, for better or for worse. And the reason this was shared to me is because it actually had a tie with Tartaria and Pinocchio, one of my favorite Disney movies. Always rang true in some unsettling way, even as a child, and I often saw myself as a Pinocchio, especially when it came to the part where he's on the island with all the bad children and they're smoking cigars and they turn into donkeys, grow tails, and get packed into a ship and sold. And when I look around now and then, what I see are a bunch of donkeys around me, or sometimes we call them sheep. And what do we see when these children are convinced to go to this island? Mind you, Pinocchio wasn't kidnapped. Not directly. It required some persuading and some tempting. He was lured into the actor's life, and fame, and fortune. It was only when he arrived to his destination that he realized he was a prisoner. A big party, all the booze and cigars these kids can muster, and trashing of the old world, as we see here. Absolutely depicting what we know and research and love. And here in this old Disney flick, the chosen backdrop for destruction. How appropriate. Almost representing a new people, inheriting, having a big party, very World's Fair-like, but ultimately having no appreciation for beauty, hard work, and structure, and burning and pillaging everything in sight. And once again, something I felt so true in my youth, not understanding why, but feeling that this was what was and is never feeling like this is how we are supposed to live. And here again, showing this World's Fair type of environment, and in the background a depiction of the old world, and these kids having zero care or concerns for it, similar to our people, with the exception of a few, until recently. And here's a nice little share by one of my Patreons, Holly, and she tells us she grew up in Southern California, and there was a factory on the freeway that looked like an Assyrian palace. Her grandpa said he remembered it being a tire factory. Eventually this tire factory was refurbished into a shopping mall, but originally it was a rubber company. And let's have a little look at this old rubber company. Ah, of course, exactly the way we would want to build a factory, essentially. Absolutely beautiful. And in 1918, Adolf Schweitzer started the Sampson Tire and Rubber Company in a tiny wood frame factory in Compton. And in a short 10-year period, he decided to build this baby, one of the largest manufacturing facilities under one roof west of the Mississippi. Stupid story, 1,300 feet long and a little overkill. If in 1918 his tiny wood frame factory was sufficient, why would we jump into something like this? Impossible, of course. And here's a little look at the Assyrian, or really Anunnaki type characters with their little handbags. Of course this is how you would want to build a tire factory. Like a castle. He spent $8 million and hired these architects Morgan, Walls, and Clements. And if you haven't seen my video on the 3 architects in New York City with wooden nickels, I suggest you check that out. And this makes me want to dig into these 3 architects. And this particular rubber factory was designed in the style of King Sargon II's palace. Truly, they must think we're stupid, or at least did when they wrote these narratives. Sargon was a Babylonian king with a 23-acre palace, and Schleitzer's plant, by accident or by design, covered the same amount of land, surrounded by a giant wall as we see here, and all kinds of depictions around this plant, forms of jinn or genie, winged bowls with human heads, and so forth. And in actuality, they did end up pumping out quite a few tires in this factory, eventually becoming the Uniroyal Tire Factory in 1962, now surrounded by office buildings and a mall. I look forward to going to this, and I do plan on taking a trip to California soon, and I want to take full advantage of this opportunity. And here we are, current day. Definitely a mall, and what is original is left to be seen. Here we go. Really remarkable on this 23-acre complex. And here's some great photos of the restoration, or most likely the unrestoration. Looks like they covered up the exterior and put a stucco facade over the top, giving it that nice, cheap mall look. And here is supposed to be a photo of it just after it was complete. And pretty massive. You might have a feeling there was a lot more to it. Probably all the ornamental flares were removed and a big flat roof was put over the top. Here we see what looks like some ancient lines, what would now be turned into an airport, and pretty mind-blowing. This probably was an old Tartarian airport. And then she talks about this old Spanish mission in California, and this is supposed to be an old church. Some old ruins of a Spanish church. And totally mind-blowing. What do we see? Brick going way too far underground, further than necessary, really lending to the idea that there is a city buried under here. Truly some old ruins. And here we can have a little look in modern times of ruins in California. Absolutely mind-blowing, beyond the abilities of Spanish missionaries. Here we can have a look at a missionary on the far left side. And what do we see here? The same thing that we see everywhere. Brick covered in facade, extra thick, excessively thick. And this was nothing short of something massive and glorious. Here a little close-up, and here's what it looked like when they found it. How it could end up in this condition from when it was built by the Spaniard missionaries is beyond me, if I'm trying to follow the narrative, of course. And a fascinating share. Thank you for this, Holly. And I've recently subscribed to a new channel, as seen here, another urban exploring channel, and I just love these channels, really tying into our research beautifully. And all these channels providing a lot of the boots on the ground research that we need. And here, just a treasure trove of sites to explore. Here we can see an abandoned railroad building. Here the Scott Tower in Massachusetts. And here a castle-like tower in the background called Mount Greylock. And this beauty, the Majestic Theater. And not only am I sharing these with you, but referencing them for myself. I'd like to dig into all these. This one I did a bit, just mind-blowing. Here the Penhurst Asylum. We love our asylums, way over the top, totally unnecessary. And it just goes on and on. I encourage you to check them out, and of course do your own explorations in your particular area. And here I wanted to show you this one. Looks like they posted it about 2 years ago. Civil War Ruins, the Battle of Shepherdstown. And these buildings are older than the trees around them, in complete ruins, looking like the base of the Towers of Bologna. And I know the feeling that I would get exploring such ruins, especially trying to make sense of things, using the historical narrative as one's only reference, and just not making any sense. Of course, these ruins being by water, and just way over the top. This is not some Civil War construction. Are you kidding me? This baby clearly goes down further and went up much higher. A massive tower in which we're only seeing the remains of. Brick with a facade covering. And all along the water's edge, building. And really just out in the middle of nowhere. These are as good as ruins get. And I really love the reaction of the Urban Explorer channels. Once again, you can hear the shock in their speech as they try to understand what they're seeing. And this was the case with this mud-flooded window here. How do you explain something like this historically? And this is our true history. And here they just keep on going up the hill, just deep out into the woods, and stumble upon this ruin, again with the entrance buried. And these are supposed to be Civil War ruins, just to remind you. Here's a little look on the inside, and they were absolutely blown away by this. The truth revealing itself, even without any historical context. They knew very well that this structure continued and had been blocked off, and the inside just packed with brick, meters thick, in complete ruins. And they continue walking behind it and realize that this whole hillside is actually the structure, completely buried. And here we are on the back side. We can see mud-flooded windows on the side down there. Here's a better look, and what looks like columns, and truly the remains of what I think was the Star Fort builders, which I'm also coming to understand must have belonged to the people before all of these glorious structures we see on ground level. And this was the first reset in our recent time. And everything being inherited and covered and repurposed with facades built on top of the old, and then again another reset. And finally we arrive with two unexplained eras surrounding us, one in plain sight and one buried under our feet. And as always, I salute anyone, and in this case this channel, for going out and doing what, in my opinion, is modern day archaeology. We have a lot of catching up to do. So that's it. I thank you so much for joining me, and do have a blessed day. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I get no kick from champagne. Mere alcohol doesn't thrill me at all. So tell me, why should it be true that I get a kick out of you? Some like the bobtail refrain. I'm sure that if I heard even one lick, it would bore me terrifically too. Yet I get a kick out of you.